Feeling like your church needs some change, but you also feel all alone? This one's for you. Stick around for the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. Change. Changing. Turn and face the change. Change. Are those the words to that song?
You're in the ballpark.
Yeah. Change is hard, man. And change in church is really hard. Navigating change is difficult. This is something that we've addressed a couple of times in the podcast in different ways, but it's been a while. It's been a hot minute since we've talked about navigating change in the church, and we thought it's time to do it. It's time to talk about change.
This is a little more foundational. This is like this is the genesis of change. Is somebody says, I don't really feel like things are as they should be. And we get these calls. I know you're out there. You might be listening right now. And you're just like, you feel like you're the only one. Like, am I the only one seeing this? Or maybe you might know of some other people and you're all kind of like, what do we do? How do we get this rolling? Yeah. So that's what today is about is the very first couple of things that are going to happen to begin to build any kind of momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really frustrating, and this is a common time to feel this would be when you're new. When you're new at a church, you just you came in, you got a pocket full of dreams, right, for what this church can be, and then you walk in and you're sort of confronted with what is. You're looking around and going, "Oh my goodness, how do I get from where we are right now to where I feel like we need to be? How do we even start that process of change?" Another time might be you decline in church. Often you don't feel it because it happens slowly and over time. But you can reach moments where you've crossed some sort of a threshold and you go, we used to have 2 services, but you're not filling them anymore. And so you just look out one day and go, oh my goodness, we don't really need 2 services. We should just go down to 1, which AJ, you recorded an episode on how to go down to one service. But maybe something like that, and have some sort of an event in the life of the church that you look at and go, I think we need some change.
Yeah. And so who might be feeling this and who is this for? Well, I mean, there's really kind of 3 general types of people that this might be appealing to, and it covers anyone. So three categories that covers anyone might be, and we get these calls. We've had these calls from all 3 of these categories. Number 1, the pastor might be feeling like things need to change, and he feels all alone in that position. And that fits even to what you just said, Scott. Maybe he's new to the church. And it could be either way. We've talked with the pastor that has just been there or only been there a short time, or they've been there for a long time and they feel that way. The second category would be like senior leadership level people. We've spoken with a lot of elders or church council members who feel this way. And again, these are like solo people. They've reached out. They're not sure if anybody else kind of feels the way they do or not. And then the third category is simply a member of the church. We've had these folks as well. They're just like, what could even be done? And what could I do? Those certainly are the ones that feel the most alone, because they're not involved even in leadership decisions. So they're starting probably from, the most challenging position. But they just have this sense they've got a willingness to participate, maybe even a willingness to participate financially in helping something happen. And they're on a mission to try to figure out what to do. So I think that covers almost anybody that might be listening to us today. So I hope a lot of people are in their car or wherever out for a jog and going, yeah, that's me. You may be feeling alone in your church, needing to see change happen. We get these calls all the time from pastors around the world in very small congregations that are under-resourced to make change happen in their church. Go to malphursgroup.com/donate today. Even your small contribution can help a pastor who needs to be resourced to see positive change happen in his church.
And now back to the episode. Let's dive into how we get started in building a consensus for change. So our first point here, AJ, is we need to understand the environment. You got to know what is the water that you're swimming in, so to speak. What's the climate? Is this a place where people are already open and willing and ready for change? Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes is this a place where things are really closed down and people feel like everything's just fine the way it is? You got to know the relational climate. You have to know who are the stakeholders. There's all kinds of things you need to know. And getting started with change without considering the multivariate things here can be dangerous, and it can actually prevent change from happening. So let's talk more about this. So we need to first sort of understand the environment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a power structure at your church. Every single one has it. And sometimes it even sounds kind of bad, even to rephrase it that way, a power structure. But in and of itself, it's not bad. I mean, it's just the way decisions are made. It's the authority that's been placed either through a common denominational structure, or just the way the church is operated, if it's an independent church, by its constitution. But you have to understand what that environment is. Now, again, if you're just a member of the church, you may not understand it as well as an elder or the pastor certainly would understand it. So you may be at more of a deficit of learning to begin with. Like, how do decisions get made around here? Who's really in charge? And then there's also the reality of who's in charge on paper isn't who's in charge functionally or practically. So, there's some very influential people or pockets within the church that they just have a lot of influence. They have a lot of power, even though it's not vested in them constitutionally. So all of this, I hope this doesn't begin to sound sinister or manipulative. That's not the intent at all. I mean, we have to deal in reality, and the fact is, one person cannot affect change. You can't unilaterally make decisions for everybody. You have to have others with you on this. And of course, you want that to be healthy change and well thought out and biblically based and spiritually sought. So it requires more people. And this is just good strategy and good relationship building to work through the people that you need to begin having these conversations.
Yeah. One of the things that just in consulting that I have learned, and I still occasionally step on my own toe and stub my toe on this issue from time to time, but is knowing there may be things that you don't know that are really relevant to whether or not you're going to make a change. So what happened with here's an example. I was with a church a few months ago, and the church is great. Like they're healthy, they're in a good place, but the church was born out of a church split, and I didn't know that previously, and it happened many years ago at this point, like 20, 30 years ago, maybe longer than that. It's been a long time. But that's a detail that is good to know, because there are still people at that church who carry with them, they left another church because they were angry, like or whatever. So there's there's a dynamic there. You got to be aware of that, so that when you're engaging in change, if you could step on a nerve and not know, I'm stepping on a nerve that's has roots that are 30 years back. So and understanding the environment also means understanding the history and understanding
Great point.
The roots of these things. You have to. It doesn't mean you have to tiptoe around all that. Sometimes you need to step on a nerve, but you need to know that that's what you're doing and not accidentally do it.
Yeah, we have definitely both had those experiences. And sometimes, I mean, to be honest with you, it's irrational at this point. This is 30 years ago. It's held too closely, should have been let go a long time ago, but it hasn't been. But that doesn't change everybody's felt reality in that moment. Whether they should have let go of it Doesn't matter. Now that we're talking about it, we have to deal with what people really feel about it and how the history has affected them. So hopefully, this could end up being a healing process going forward. But this, you got to put on your emotional intelligence hat and understand the people and the environment and react appropriately to that and work through these things. It's just another bump in the road.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing the history isn't an excuse not to change, but it does help you know how to navigate the change. It's like helping you understand why is this leadership team structured the way that it is? Why is the polity what it is? Very often, a structure or a policy or a polity is a reflection of something that happened. Oh, this happened because this pastor did this, or because this team did that. And that's not an excuse not to change something, but you need to, if you know the history, you're going to know the objections to the way that you're wanting to move things moving forward. You know how to address those things. So yeah, start with, you should be doing a lot of research up front before you start trying to initiate a change.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So the next one is, and this is, we got 4 points here for you today. These are small, incremental, granular steps. We're not moving mountains here. So our second one is simply starting small. We're talking about going from you to one or two more people that are beginning to sense the need for change. So, and in this, again, we're talking about relationships. So, who, and you want to have, a trust-based conversation with somebody. So, don't pick a random stranger to begin bringing things up. That can actually lead to a dysfunctional environment. If we're out every week after church in the parking lot with a random person that you don't even know saying, what do you think this is an issue? All you're going to do then is begin setting you up for perhaps a huge church division. So we've got to work with people that we already know, we have a relationship with, and in kindness and love, just begin broaching some of these topics that you feel might be unhealthy in the church or that could be greater performers. Doesn't even necessarily have to be looked at as unhealth. Like, could our church be doing better? Could we simply excel and improve in our strengths? But this is simply beginning with somebody else to, in some way, even validate your thoughts, or invalidate. You might talk to a few people and they're like, no, I don't really see it that way, or consider this other side of it. Maybe there isn't as big of an issue as you feel like there is. But that starts with conversations and seeing if what you think may be reality.
Yeah, my mind immediately went, AJ, to Nehemiah chapter 2, when Nehemiah goes to when he comes to Jerusalem at first, he starts by Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 11 says, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, verse 12, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. So then he describes, by night I went through the valley gate toward the jackal well and the dung gate, and he examined the walls of Jerusalem. He kind of says the route that he took. So it's this huge, significant change that needs to happen, that everyone knows needs to happen. But before he does it, he goes and inspects the gate for himself, and he brings a few others with him. And so he starts small.
Yeah, that's good. As soon as you said Nehemiah, I was like, that came to mind for me too. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's important. And again, this is not Nehemiah didn't tell everybody because he didn't have the information to make it a big public thing. He was wise. He wasn't being secretive or manipulative. He was taking the necessary steps to.
Yeah, he had a vision, but he didn't yet have a plan.
Yeah.
And so when
Yep.
if you've got a vision for where you want to go, but you have no route to get there, you need to keep that thing to yourself.
Yeah.
At first.
And you don't fully understand the condition of the walls today.
Right.
You have to understand the condition of the walls. That's
Right.
great. Love that. All right. Our third one is adding a dose of reality. So, so we're kind of building on this. So even if we've got a small group of people that are all sort of like, okay, yeah, I kind of think there is something here. That may not be what you need to go to the next step of forming a greater coalition, or a greater, even coalition kind of sounds bad, like we're forming factions, but just gaining more acceptance and understanding of the situation. Sometimes we need a little bit more objective reality. And so some kind of an assessment is sometimes really in order for this. We have such a thing we call the church ministry analysis, and it's a super effective tool that we use often, and that is it's a really great tool for a lot of churches in this position. We literally get these calls. We have a few people, we've been talking about this. We're not sure what to do next, to be able to make the elders understand, or to make our pastor understand, or to make our congregation understand that we might need to change. And so we can take you through, an objective assessment, gaining lots of input from you, to be able to then say, okay, well, here's how things are looking against what a healthy church should be looking like. And that takes a lot of pressure then off of a group of leaders that are seeking change, to say, look, it's not just us. We've talked through this now. We've gathered some data, and we've had somebody else help process through this. And it's looking like we have some opportunity here. So this can be really, really helpful to move you to the next step.
Yeah. I'll go back to Nehemiah, right? And I apologize if you've ever had me out to your church and I've preached at your church. You've heard me preach on this. And if I've got some churches I'm coming up with this summer and I'm going to be at your church and you've asked me to preach, and I may be preaching from this. So sorry.
It's good stuff, and it's applicable. Yep.
It's good stuff and it's applicable. So my mind immediately goes to Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 17, where Nehemiah says to the people at this point, he gathers the, who does he, is it all the people? Let's see. Yeah. He gathers the people together and he says, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire." And I love this so much, because it's not a question. It's just a declarative statement. It's not, do you see the trouble we are in? As if it's subjective, like maybe you do and maybe you don't. It's just an acknowledgement of the reality. He says, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. And something if you listen to the Bible Project podcast, some of you maybe listen to that one also. They've been going at the time of this recording in May 2023. They've been going through this idea of the theme of the city, and one of the things they talk about in the podcast, which don't need to listen to that podcast to know this, is that in that time frame in the ancient Near East, what made a city is it had fortifications, it had a wall. And so when Nehemiah talks about how they're suffering derision, it would be like the neighboring places would say, Jerusalem isn't even a real city. It doesn't have walls. And it's been like that for over 100 years. I mean, they've been the laughing stock of the region, because it's a city that has no walls isn't a city at all. And so for him to say, you see the trouble we are in, and it's, of course it is. And, your church is no different. There might be things that people aren't willing to say out loud, but that doesn't make them not true. And it doesn't make it not known. You see that we've been in decline. You see that we've lost families. You see that this facility has kind of fallen into disrepair. And if you ask it as a question, people might get defensive. But if you just make it as a declarative statement, there's no denying the weight of that reality.
Yeah.
You got to be sensitive. Like, you got to be pastoral, I guess. You don't need to be brash, but you do have to be honest.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, hey, that's it. That's it. And I love that. There's appropriate times in which questions need to be asked, and then there's appropriate times in which statements need to be made. And this would be one of those, that a statement needs to be made. So yeah, that's good. I don't think I have anything else to add to that. Adding a dose of reality is needed to continue to build momentum, to work towards decisions for change. So, and then our fourth piece, again, we're not taking you all the way to the end of your church all of a sudden is healthy. The fourth piece here is just expanding that coalition. So the results of that reality injection from the previous point is that more people, or a critical mass of people, are now in agreement. And so the goal then is not simply to have a lot of people then saying, yeah, we should do something. The piece that we're not getting to today is that you have a large enough group of people to say, let's make a plan for change, whether that is, working with an organization like the Malphurs group, or whether that's some internal changes that are going to happen. We would encourage you, obviously, for whatever that's going to be, that it be well thought out, and holistic, not simply attacking one small thing that seems obvious, but expanding that coalition. This begins to bring us, back into sort of where we started, understanding the polity of the church. Who exactly do we need to be able to make a decision to go forward? Is this at the authority of our church council or our elder board? Do we have to have a church vote on this? The answers to those questions will tell you how large of a group of people, becoming like-minded do we need. So you may have known that. Maybe in step one, you figured that out. But if not, we still have to deal with, again, the folks that are influential, that do wield power, that maybe aren't official, and make sure that we have them on board. Or, I guess in worst case scenarios, a critical mass of people to be able to override that one person or family who seems to have the power of 10. So could be that situation.
Yeah. Again, I'll be our looping everything back to Nehemiah today. Change really started in Nehemiah. The way that they executed the plan was, everyone was asked to just rebuild the part of the wall that was next to where they lived.
Mm-hmm.
So when you but then the higher level leaders, the priests and so on, they were asked to take on the gates and the more complex and complicated parts of the wall. And so I think there is a principle here that we can extract, which is change starts with the thing that's closest to you. Some people, they hear change and they think, well, what am I going to be asked to do? Am I going to be asked to do some big complicated thing? Am I going to be asked to do something that I feel really uncomfortable with? And change is always hard. Building a wall always requires work, but just start with the piece of the wall that's right outside of where you live. And so when you're building and expanding that coalition, ask people to take a small step for themselves in the right direction, but expect more from those who call themselves leaders. And don't worry about trying to get everyone to do the complicated things. Get most people to do an easy thing. And then when you're building that coalition, expect more from your leaders. Yeah,
that's good. That's really good. Were there some people that lived in the interior of the city that were off the hook? They didn't have to do anything. It was only the people with the expensive property that backs up to the wall.
Some people even had to come from Jericho and build a tower and things like that. So yeah, they were bringing in some help. But please don't rain on my analogy here by overcomplicating it with facts. AJ, please.
It all works. All right, so there you go. So yeah, I hope whoever you are listening that felt alone, maybe that is your reality today, but it doesn't have to be. So with a couple of small incremental things, you can begin to have a conversation that maybe would lead to some positive change in your church. That would be our desire for you. So that being said, Scott, this is the end of episode 193 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. So you can go to malphursgroup.com/193 to read today's show notes and have the link over to the YouTube version as well to see our smiling faces talk about this topic with you. leave us a comment and a like over there. Share it with somebody that maybe this would be helpful for. And we're sure glad that you listened. We'll see you again next week.